Bob Buckhorn is here, everyone. David, I hope we're live. We rolling? Beautiful. Welcome, Bob.
Garrett, it's good to be here.
Former Mayor Bob Buckhorn, you were mayor 2011 to 19. Boy, what a pivotal time for Tampa. You know, just reflecting back, we were talking about the recession, a total dead zone, you know, not a whole lot going on in downtown at that time. Everyone would leave after 5 o'clock. And now it's incredible to see the change and the energy, and life has finally been injected into our downtown. But you really were at that kind of tipping point, 2011 to 19. And that's the era where Vennett came to town and the city and the county made deals and made that happen. And a lot of what you see today in our urban core is attributed to your efforts.
Well, my efforts and a lot of other people's efforts. You know, and it was even more complex than that, Garrett. When I came into office in 2011, we were in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. Revenues had plummeted. City tax revenues had plummeted. There were some 4,000 homes in some state of mortgage distress or foreclosure. Companies were fleeing. Our young people, your generation, they were leaving Tampa to go to places like Charlotte and to Austin and to Raleigh-Durham, places that offered them hope and offered them an opportunity, growing and emerging Sunbelt cities. And so not only had we been stuck in a rut for a while, I mean, I used to tell people that not that long ago, in downtown Tampa, there were like 600 people that lived here, and 400 of them lived in the Morgan Street jail. I mean, that's how bleak it was. I mean, those of us that have been here for a while can remember not only did the sidewalks roll up, but there was no retail, there was no residential, there was no activities downtown. And so part of my mission was to shepherd this city out of that recession, while at the same time trying to inspire them to believe that things were going to get better. And if we stuck together and we worked together and we celebrated together and we mourned together, and if we believed in the capacity of this city to get to that promised land, that we could do it together. And in order to do that, we would have to do some certain things and take some certain steps that would allow us to be a more competitive city, a more attractive city to young talent that was coming here. And so that was what we set out to do. I mean, it was very methodical. It was very deliberate. We had a plan called the Envision Plan that laid out that roadmap, largely focused on making the waterfront the center of our downtown, not the western edge.
Right.
And we set about achieving that and executing on that plan. And I think the end results, as you talked about, speak for themselves. I mean, the transformation of our city over the last 15 years has been nothing more than phenomenal. I mean, we are a story of an American city that rose from the ashes of that recession to become one of the most desirable cities in the country. And you see it every day, Garrett, in the number of young people, young, talented, college-educated people who are moving here to be a part of this experiment that we call Tampa.
It's so exciting to be here and now and be a young, ambitious person.
It's
like our producer, David, during the pandemic, you were sick of what was going on the West Coast. You moved to Tampa. Well, no, you moved to the Northport area, and now you've moved to Tampa because the energy is undeniable now. The momentum is there. The amount of different businesses and cultures and concepts that have traveled from all across the country. I've talked about it all the time, but Angela Yu with Grand Cathedral coming from California, creating that awesome cigar studio. Harry Caiaphas building Sterling Cigar Lounge in Ybor City, coming from New York. Like, people from all over the country see Tampa as this metropolitan, opportunistic place where they can come and make a name for themselves.
And that is exactly what we set out to do.
Yeah. And I don't think, 15 years ago, before you were in office, maybe in the 90s or 2000s when I was growing up, people didn't think like that. I think if, when I was a little kid, you said, hey, there's going to be a place called Water Street with an Edition hotel and, $25 crab cakes, people would have said, no way, there's no way that's possible. But it is.
It is. And the best part is, Garrett, we have more chapters to write. I mean, this city is not done. And if a city isn't growing, it's dying. And I know that there are challenges that come with the growth. I recognize that. There are things that come with our success that are not insurmountable, but they are challenging, whether it's transportation or affordability. But I can tell you what, those are good problems to have, because I would rather be in that situation than what I have lived through in Tampa before, when those opportunities weren't available for people, and that hope and that belief in what's coming, and that recognition that we can compete for anything in the world and be successful about it. That didn't exist. It exists now.
Right.
And it's contagious. It's now part of people's DNA that they believe in Tampa and they believe in what we can do together. And it's happening. I mean, it really is magical what has occurred over the last decade.
It really is. And you know, like you said, maybe for a long time the city was limping along, and you know, what problem did we not have 30 years ago, right? But you're seeing now this administration is paving a ton of roads. You've got a ton of infrastructure work going, record infrastructure work with the PIPES program. Then you also have some exciting stuff. The West River redevelopment. You've got Darrell and Vinnick, you know, doing these incredible developments in the urban core. There's a lot happening, but you're right. We do have a long way to go. I mean, we still have transportation needs. We still need to fix the rest of the roads and the potholes and the sidewalks. We need more fire stations. We need to beef up our police force and make this city as safe as it can be. Like, there's still, you know, maybe you're never out of the woods. And when you're talking about a city, there's always something to work on.
And that's true. And that's a good problem to have. The bones in this community are solid. You know, the challenge will be moving forward is to not strangle on our own growth and on our own success. I mean, I've seen cities around the country, and Atlanta always comes to mind as a city where the growth outpaced the investment in infrastructure. And the end result was you're going to kill the goose that lays the golden egg. And we have to be careful not to do that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we have to be really careful about is to not lose what makes us unique as Tampaños and what makes this city so unique. And to me, that's its authenticity, its diversity. We can never lose sight of that. We don't want to become an artificial manufactured city. Mm-hmm. We want to be who we are, and that is something really special. But we really do have to invest in making sure that the infrastructure is in place to accommodate the growth. And at the end of the day, that is a discussion always and forevermore about money and resources.
Yep.
And so while we're enjoying all of this success, our citizens have to understand that there's a price associated with that. And whether it's an investment in our schools, whether it's an investment in transportation, whether it's an investment in housing and opportunities for neighborhoods that have fallen behind, we've got to be willing to make sure that we don't do what Atlanta didn't do.
A lot of people are fearful, including myself, right? We don't want to become that. We don't want to be Miami. No. We don't want to be Atlanta. We don't want to be the mess that is those metropolitan areas that have put infrastructure kind of on the back burner and focused on some of the other cool stuff. And then you end up with maybe a great city and it's got culture and fun restaurants, but it's just a mess. Mm-hmm. No one wants that. And then another thing too is the cultural identity. You're right. I mean, what a shame it would be for us to grow and develop. And I've got this rendering that Studio HB did. It's a couple years old, but it can kind of give you an idea of what this city will look like in the next 10, 20 years when all this development is complete. Yeah, that's great. But what about the story of all the people that came here 120 years ago to Cigar City and all those families that are now doctors and lawyers and business owners? I mean, a lot of that stuff is ingrained in our culture, and it would be such a shame to lose those stories.
Oh, Garrett, I mean, that is what I love about this community, and I love it with, and this past week, this is not a particularly good term, but I love it with an immigrant's fervor because I'm not from here. And to know the story and to have lived the story of this community from an outsider's perspective, and to know that we were settled by Spanish, Cuban, and Italian immigrants who came here to roll cigars, many of them not speaking the language, many of them with nothing but the clothes off their back, who came to this place called America and this city called Tampa because they believed that they could improve their lives. Mm-hmm. It is the immigrant story. It's no different than my forefathers getting off the boat at Ellis Island coming from Ireland. But that is what makes Tampa so unique. I mean, you can go to coffee shops, and your family is a classic example of that. You can go to coffee shops here in Tampa and sit around a table where people are speaking Italian, Spanish, and English at the same time, oftentimes with words that don't exist in any of those other languages but exist here in Tampa, and go out and get in their pickup truck and go hunting. And so it's that amazing paella
Right.
that we call Tampa. You know, if you laid out all the ingredients, you would never in a million years think that this dish would taste good. But when you put it together, it's really something special. That's who we are. We honor that diversity. We celebrate that diversity. It is our strength, never our weakness. And we need to continue to do that and to make sure that those that choose to make this their home moving forward understand that story. Mm-hmm. And understand the history of Ybor City, and understand the Cubans that fled Castro to come here in the early 60s. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And that needs to remain. It's authentic. It separates us from our competitors. And we always need to pay homage to that and not become homogenous, not respecting or understanding how we got here.
And I think beyond the appreciation of those stories and the history and some of that legacy, this actually was my great grandmother Rosa's cigar rolling and cutting equipment. Mm-hmm. I'm so thankful I have a relic like this in my possession to always remember those old stories by. But I actually think it is an asset. I actually think that in the future, as that story is told more to this nation and to the world, people will actually come here specifically to experience it. They're going to come to Disney World. They might fly into Tampa International because Orlando sucks, you know, and they're going to come here and they're going to make a stop in Ybor City and they're going to experience that culture. They're going to stop in West Tampa. They're going to check out those scenes of what it was like, and they're going to listen to those stories. And I think they're going to leave with an incredible impression. I think those are assets to our community.
They are the best thing that we have going for us.
So how did you get, first of all, interested in Tampa politics? You said you are not from here. Talk to me about what gave you the ambition from early on to become the mayor of Tampa.
I've had more courage than brains. My journey capsulized very quickly. I graduated from Penn State, was selected for naval flight training. I wanted to fly off of carriers. I wanted to fly jets and compete against the best in the world. Came to Pensacola Naval Air Station to start aviation officer candidate school. After passing all of my Class A flight physicals just to get selected for the program, they diagnosed me at Pensacola as having a degeneration of one of my corneas and discharged me. Obviously, in their eyes, a fighter pilot can't have an eye problem. I was discharged. I had $300 in discharge pay. I had a 1966 Dodge Dart, and I really had nowhere else to go. And so I drove from Pensacola Naval Air Station to Tampa, Florida, where I had a fraternity brother from Penn State living here. I slept on his couch. He moved 6 months later. I didn't know anybody here. This was 1982, 83. And I just started scratching and clawing my way up through the political brambles, if you will, in this town, culminating in being elected in 2011 as the mayor. I mean, I worked for Sandy Friedman, former mayor, for 8 years, sat on the city council for 8 years when your grandfather was the mayor, ran for mayor in 2003 and lost to Mayor Iorio, who was a dear friend of mine, still is. And then came back in 2011 and won. And so I have always been geared towards public service, whether it was serving my country or serving my community. And I knew after spending 8 years with Mayor Friedman that the office of the mayor was the one place that you could shape a city, and you could move a city, and you could create a narrative, and you could drive a city forward, much more so than other jobs in politics. And so I knew that's where I wanted to be, because I knew that I could change this city if I was ever given the chance to do so. And, you know, there were times I didn't think I was ever going to have the chance. You know, I've lost a couple races. I've won races. But when I did get the chance, I had studied successful mayors and learned from successful cities for 20 years before I ever had the opportunity to do it. And so I knew what I wanted to do the day one of getting elected. I had a plan. It was written down. I thought that the plan was the right plan for the city. And so we went out and executed.
And kind of a daunting time, right? 2011. First of all, you're 20 years in politics. You said you were on city council. You worked on political campaigns. Boy, I bet the thought of being elected mayor after being involved for 20 years, seeing what other mayors, other politicians did wrong or right, picking up different ideas along the way. What was it like election night when you found out you won?
For me, it ended up being a story of resilience. I had lost the race in 2003. I had lost a few other races along the way. Basically, everybody had written me off. And so when I got the chance, and I reminded this community of this as we progressed through the recession, that it's never about getting knocked down. It's about how you get up. And you have to make a fundamental choice, whether it was me or whether it was the city. Are we going to get up, wipe the blood off our face, get back in the game, and get in the fight? And I had no choice. I didn't know any other way. I mean, if you don't kill me, I'm getting back up. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to get in the fight. And this city made that same decision. And so the two of us stumbled through in the beginning this recession and recovered and got our feet and got in the fight. And the end result was a team, if you will, that emerged out of it stronger than when it went in. And so for me, the brick and mortar success of this city, I take pride in. But what I take the most pride in is seeing Tampa rise to the occasion and believe in itself again.
Right.
And to see that DNA change as we saw the progress and we saw the results and we came to understand that there's nothing that can stop us if we put our minds to it.
There really is this very positive feeling about this city, and I don't know that existed in that recession era. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of people lost their businesses, a lot of fear. How do you make your way out of something like that, right? So when you become mayor in 2011, you're kind of in what, cleanup and manage and fix mode? I mean, how quickly did it shift from how do we take care of what we need to take care of to get us out of this mess to Water Street and those conversations?
It was an 8-year journey. Certainly the first couple years was just trying to figure out how we were going to pay the bills.
Right.
Because our revenues had declined to 2009 numbers. Our property tax revenues, what we used to run the city. It had declined because of the recession and because of the valuations on everybody's houses that had dropped. Now they were enjoying the benefits of a lower tax rate, but that was also revenue that the city was not getting. And we would not end up getting back to 2009 numbers to 2019. So the vast majority of what people saw us do in that 8-year period was done with very, very little money and a lot of creativity and a lot of duct tape. But the other part of that was I saw my job as inspiring this community to, first of all, get off the mat. Second of all, to believe in each other. And thirdly, to show them that there would be light at the end of this tunnel, that through all of this darkness, through all of this trauma, through all of this wreckage of the recession, that we could get through it together. And that if we joined together and we pulled together, and if we believed in the plan, that we could get through it. And I saw my job as head cheerleader, to inspire people, to remind people over and over and over again that we can do this. We can get through this together. And slowly but surely, they started to believe. And slowly and surely, they saw the projects emerge that matched the rhetoric.
Right.
Whether it was the completion of the Riverwalk or whatever it may be. people like Jeff Finnick came to town and believed in the message. And so you started to see progress. You started to see Tampa host college football national championships and the Indian Film Festival award ceremony that was watched by like 20 million people around the world. You saw those things start to happen, hosting the Republican National Convention,
right,
and doing it flawlessly. People started to understand that it was not just political happy talk, that we were really doing what we said we were going to do.
So were you isolated in some of that ambitious, visionary thinking about Tampa
Maybe
in the very beginning?
Yeah, maybe in the beginning.
Because now it's undeniable. But I bet back then people were like, what is this guy talking about?
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I heard that frequently. I would sort of lay out and they'd be like, no, we can't do that.
That's not us.
Yeah, we can't do that. We can't reach that high. We can't aspire for that greatness.
So what do you attribute that strength to? I mean, how did you not listen to all those people?
Because I have lost, and I know that losing doesn't kill you, and you get back up, and you're stronger because of it. And so I wasn't going to lose, and I wasn't going to let my city lose, because we're not losers. We just needed inspiration, and we needed hope, and we needed a vision, and we needed execution. And when you're the mayor, you have the largest pulpit in the Bay Area. People pay attention when you speak. And so telling that story over and over every day, 3 or 4 times a day, it became contagious. And you started to see people look around and they're like, yeah, we can do this. You know, there's no stopping us. Who are those other cities? We're not losing our kids anymore. I'm not going to let my kids or grandkids go to Charlotte, North Carolina, because I need them to come home here to Tampa. And so it became contagious, and it became part of everybody else's DNA.
And look at those kids at the University of Tampa. I always use this example, but you know, when I was growing up, and even maybe 10, 15 years ago, most all of those kids would pack up and go back to the Northeast. Now they all want to stay.
They all stay, and they all bring their friends up with them.
So 2011, you get elected. Jim Schimberg was on the show. He was fantastic. He was your city attorney at the time, helped you, set up the convention and all this sort of stuff. Jim said that kind of the way you found out about that Water Street deal was through the convention, finding out who property owners were. The city needed parking and public safety stuff around the arena, right? And so what was your thought, right? You have this ambitious attitude about Tampa. Maybe you're the only guy that sees that vision in your head fully expressed. You've got a great team behind you who believes in you and understands that vision and are aligned with you.
Terrific team.
But
Garrett.
What was it like when you realized the magnitude and the opportunity of Water Street?
You know, it's everything lined up. I mean, all the stars lined up. It took 5 years to get us to that point.
Right, yeah.
But when you had somebody like Jeff Finnick, then partnered with Cascade, Jeff, who was not a real estate developer, didn't move to Tampa to become a real estate developer. He bought a sports team. Obviously, he'd been very successful in a previous life, bought a sports team, and then started to realize, as he heard this vision being articulated, that maybe some of these surface parking lots around the Amalie Arena would be of value someday, not knowing what he was going to do. I think originally it was just to protect his front door of the Amalie Arena. And so he started acquiring. He would set up separate LLCs in different cities, and they would purchase land until he accumulated the vast majority of the land. And then I think over time, he really bought into the vision of what Tampa could be as we moved the focus from, internal downtown to the river. And we saw that the transformation of the river and transformation of downtown with the completion of the Riverwalk that had been 6 mayors and 40 years in the making. Starting with Mayor Billy Poe, Bob Martinez, Sandy Friedman, Dick Greco, Pam Iorio, and I was lucky enough to be the one that finished it and extended it all the way up to Armature. But he saw that, and then he realized of the potential. And he realized that the Tampa story was far from being completed. And he brought in some of the best talent in the country to help him master plan Water Street, what became Water Street. And obviously with Cascade and Vinnick, I couldn't have had better partners. I mean, Jeff Finnick to me is what every sports owner should be, but most of them are not. He and I were wingmen throughout this entire thing. And I could not be more grateful to him for not just his generosity and the fact that he is such a magnanimous guy and such a community-oriented guy, but that he believed in what we could be. He and I went on the road all over the country selling Tampa. I mean, we would go and do MSNBC and Squawk Box and all of the big New York financial shows telling the story of Tampa, because you can't just tell the story to yourself. You have to tell it to the world. And you have to tell it over and over and over again. And when you travel with someone like Jeff Finnick to the financial markets, people pay attention. And when Bill Gates invests in your community, the capital markets really start to pay attention. And so we did that for 4 years.
And it was a kind of like a PR thing for the city, or was it Water Street specific?
It was the city first, Water Street specifically. And, you know, that was a great marriage.
But it was to tell that story you said at the very beginning.
Yeah. From
the rising from the ashes, the belief that we're something greater, all that sort of stuff.
And to really tell the world that you have an untapped gem here, or as Jeff would say, an undervalued stock. And when he is saying that, then people are paying attention because they know his track record of picking stocks.
Right.
And so, you know, I would take the macro picture and talk about, you know, where we're going and how we're getting there and what's occurred. And Jeff would talk about Water Street and why he invested so much money and how he moved here. And it was a potent combination. I mean, the world took notice when, you know, in those early days when we were out there telling that story.
And Bill Gates was a big name to have attached, because when I saw that, I thought, whoa, really?
Yeah.
Bill Gates, you know, multi-bajillionaire. And at the time, this was before Elon was big and on the list. I think at the time, Bill Gates was the richest man in the world. Yeah. And to have him attached to that project was great publicity for the city.
It was earth-shaking
for sure
in the real estate world.
And this was very early on, right? Very early on in your administration.
I think we pitched
11, 12.
Yeah, we pitched Michael Larson, who runs Cascade, for Mr. Gates in 2012, 2013, maybe.
So call it a year and a half in.
Yeah.
Wow.
When there was, you know, there weren't a lot of believers at the time.
No, and I want to talk specifically, if we can, about how that deal was done, right? Here's a guy, Vinnick, you know, very wealthy, makes a huge commitment to this city. Lord knows what he spent in total in this community, from his philanthropic initiatives, investing money into the arena to make it what it is today, all the real estate stuff he's been doing. But how did it work with the city, with the infrastructure? Right. Today, local politicians, ones that disagree for whatever reason, which I should talk to them about the money that was spent with Hillsborough County and the city to give Water Street incentives to get that deal done, et cetera. Can we talk about that deal specifically and why it was necessary to, I don't want to use the word give away, but cut a deal with them in some sort of exchange with this infrastructure?
Sure. Yeah. And I would tell you that you shouldn't look at it as disagreement. You should look at it as demagoguery, because the numbers don't lie. Downtown, let's start at the beginning to help people understand. Downtown is in what's called a community redevelopment agency. And within that, you have what's called tax increment financing. And so when you set up a CRA, which we did 40 years ago in downtown Tampa, you basically draw some geographic boundaries and you freeze the tax rate at what it was at the time you set it up, right? So all of the pre-CRA dollars go back into the general revenue fund. Moving forward, any additional increase in valuation, tax revenues, property tax revenues, that accumulate or that accrue in the district have to stay in the district. The thought being at the time was it was a tool to fight urban blight. And if you drew these boundaries around this geographic area, you could help incentivize projects within that to cure urban blight. That downtown CRA has been in existence for 40 years. And so we have Every year, we accumulate millions of dollars in it that come from the properties within the district. And so the city and the county, as part of Water Street, each committed $50 million apiece to the infrastructure costs, not to the developer, but to the infrastructure cost, roads, sewers, swales, stormwater, sidewalks.
Realigning that whole street grid.
The whole street grid, which of course inures to the project, but not to the developer personally. So we committed a total of $100 million to that project. That project has become a $4 billion investment in phase 1. Now they're starting phase 2 on the site of the old ConAgra flour mill, which is a whole nother story. So that $100 million will return probably tenfold over the life of that commitment in tax revenue, some of which to the CRA, which will allow us to go seed other projects. Some of it in school taxes, some of it in liquor taxes, it's going to be a huge driver of revenue to the city. So those investments from the CRA pay dividends in the long term, and they are exactly the kind of investments that cities should and could and can make.
So the investment was $50 million from the city, $50 million from the county, totaling $100 million.
Right.
What I'm trying to look up, I don't even know if it would be on Hill's tax, but I'm curious to know, what is the tax revenue just within that, 6 or 8 block section? You talk about the CRA's been in existence for 40 years. How much money is generated in that just small area of downtown in the next 40 years? It's got to be way more than $100 million.
Oh, it will be, for sure. Yeah, absolutely it will be.
Yeah, let me see if I can find that.
I actually have those numbers. I don't have them with me. But if you see the amount of tax revenue, not just property tax, that will be thrown off as a result of that project, it more than justifies the investment by the city and the county into Water Street.
I think I found one building, and this might not be entirely accurate, but I believe 500 Channelside Drive, so they paid 2023 $933,000 in tax. Last year they paid over $1 million. That's just one of those properties.
And you multiply that over 30 years, which is the lifetime of the commitment.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a complete no-brainer.
And for people to say that the CRAs are obsolete or should be capped or whatever, I mean, there's so much more in downtown Tampa that we need to do, that we can do, that could be seeded or funded by the CRAs. For example, extending the streetcar.
Right.
I mean, that could and should be a very appropriate investment of CRA dollars in that. What becomes a problem is when you give it to non-tax producing entities like not-for-profits that don't replenish the fund, that don't allow you to reseed other projects, and that are just takers and not givers.
How do you balance that out, though? Because if the city owns some cultural institution like the Straz, right, and they can't replenish CRA funds
because they don't pay property taxes,
right? So, but it is necessary to have the Straz. I mean,
yes,
it's a cultural
absolutely.
institution.
Yeah.
It's a landmark. It defines our river arts district.
It did at one point. It is now one of many.
Now it's one of many, right? With the new air development and all that cool stuff going on,
which the Straz fought tooth and nail for a decade.
They didn't want that.
No.
Why not?
I have no idea.
Huh. It seems to me like it's a match made. You've got retail component.
It's funny how that works, isn't it?
Huh. Now that was an interesting deal because kind of like Water Street, you had that realignment of a street grid.
We took basically.
Was this under your administration?
Yeah, we did this deal. We took basically a underutilized piece of land at an intersection of two streets, carved it out, created an entire city block, and put out an RFP for the block. It was won by some developers. The Straz literally fought it every step of the way, went to city council behind the administration's back, and did everything they possibly could to try and kill this deal.
So in my head, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's like magic money, right? I mean, you're taking an area of town that generates zero tax revenue, creating a block And now you have a new building that generates probably hundreds of thousands, if not more, a year.
Yes, and provides housing.
And housing.
Desperately needed.
Right, housing supply, which is a huge issue, and we can talk about that a little later. Can you zoom in on the middle bridge you see, David, where the Julian B. Lane Park? I don't know if David just moved to Tampa, by the way, one of the first residents of Gas Works.
Oh, there we go.
So he's still getting used to the map and the lay of the land. So see, David, on the right, that building under construction. So that's the block we're talking about. That block did not exist.
No.
So the city actually created that block, partnered with a developer to develop that building. And now you've got money coming out of, I mean, I don't want to say thin air, but kind of, right?
And it's a gorgeous building. And these two streets that you see there intersected where that building now is. And so we realigned the streets. I swapped some land with the county who owns the library behind the library. Basically created an entire city block, and we now have another beautiful structure there that complements the Straz, provides retail on the ground floor for people going to the Straz. They got $1 million from the developer, and we created a street grid that actually works now. And so it's a win-win for everybody. And so when that topped out and opened up about a month ago, I couldn't have been happier.
Well, I think people are often frustrated and worried about what could be, but then when things are built and operational, they seem to be satisfied. And almost every project that I've seen, there's always frustrations in the beginning.
Yeah. It's the fear of the unknown, Garrett.
Fear of the unknown, right.
Yeah, I mean, they like their little comfortable existence, not realizing that, if you stay the same, you stay static.
Are there any other areas around downtown that could have a similar story? Because to me, this is a genius way to create more housing. I mean, every metric is positive on this, it seems.
Let's take us down Tampa Street, almost to the intersection with Interstate 275.
So right here to the north,
here,
David.
Yeah.
All that kind of mess right in the middle.
Yeah, zoom in. Okay, go up a little bit higher. This way. No, I'm sorry.
Zoom out.
Zoom out. All right. I mean, if you talk about opportunities for future development, I don't want to get up because I'm going to lose my mic. Can you still pick me up if I'm?
I can explain what you were explaining.
If you take the Royal Street parking lot, zoom out. Okay. The city owns the Royal Street parking lot right there. You have the Army Navy store right next to it. Right there. You have the city owns half of that block right there. Just imagine if you did a project on Tampa Street where you took the Royal Street lot, the Army Navy store, you can close the street between the Army Navy store and the Royal Street lot. You could do an air bridge over to the next parcel. You could take the Royal Street lot, do 3 or 4 decks of public parking, go vertical up above it, do retail on Tampa Street. You could take that Army Navy store, demolish it. The city owns it already. Demolish it. You could go vertical with a high rise, and then eventually do something with that site that butts up against the interstate. Now, if you go a little bit further this way, you've got the state office building. Look at all that surface parking lot right there. There's a state office building right there. You can see it. Move your cursor a little bit to the left. Right there. A 1960s design state office building, totally underutilized. Just imagine if you could strike a deal with the state to take that entire parcel and redevelop it and repurpose it.
And I believe that's Franklin Street in the middle, correct?
It's Tampa Street on one side and Franklin Street on this side.
In the middle,
right
and then Florida is on the west side.
Yep.
No, east side. I'm sorry.
And this is the Marion Street Transitway here. Now go over to where, go this way. Okay. See that vacant lot right there that was supposed to be the terminus for the high-speed rail? Right there. I mean, look at all of that vacant land.
Who owns that?
The state. The state DOT. Again, I'm asking people to not see that and be comfortable and satisfied with it, but to see what it could become. Just imagine if you could strike a deal with the state to acquire that parcel. And then you're starting to be able to connect Gasworks to downtown Tampa. You look at the development coming up here where the YMCA is, right over here, and that's Stetson Law School. that Casey Ellison is doing. Yeah, right in there. Right
Where
in
that
there.
road is diagonal. Yep.
All of that there, that whole block. And then you start to be able to connect Armature to Tampa Heights, potentially extend the trolley down Palm or 7th, connect it to Ybor City. You've got Brightline coming in from the high-speed rail coming in from Orlando, dead ending in all likelihood Ybor City. So then you start to square off our urban core and create a really, really exciting environment. That's the next frontier, Garrett. That's when you hear me talking about connecting the dots and squaring off the urban experience. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about.
And I believe the U.S. DOT, Florida DOT, and the city is undergoing some sort of a deal to reconfigure the interchange.
Yes.
That exits 275. Zoom in, David, a little bit back to where we were talking about originally.
I think they're going to drop the Ashley off-ramp to grade or something.
Yeah, and you know,
that whole intersection.
This is
right
a
there.
ridiculous off-ramp. You don't need that much room. But if you were to shorten that, boom, there you go. You even have more land that can be developed. And people are going to wonder, well, what the hell is in it for me, Bob? You know, why let all these rich developers build all this stuff? What's in it for me? It's the conversation about generating tax revenue to fix roads in your neighborhood.
Well,
more right? I mean, more police, more firefighters, more better sidewalks. Like that, the reason why you grow and the reason why you do all these things and create this base is to support other projects around the city.
Absolutely. And if you're not growing and if you're not throwing off revenue, it's really hard to do some of the necessary and very positive things in other neighborhoods because you just don't have the revenue. So it's the growth that drives the revenue that gives the ability for the city to do things in East Tampa or West Tampa or North Tampa. You know, whether it's fixing drainage or providing opportunities for, you know, at-risk kids, whatever it is, you've got to have the revenue to be able to do that. And the only way you have that revenue is by growth.
And so many people on the different channels we have comment about ambitious transportation projects, like one day extending the streetcar to a bunch of different neighborhoods in Tampa, especially up into Armature Works and then looping back to Ybor, or a light rail regional project. All of that, to get all of that done, you're going to have to grow and you're going to have to develop and you're going to have to do things like you're explaining. Mm-hmm. It's the only way to get the money to do something like that.
Well, and to compound the problem is projects of that magnitude, whether it's extending the streetcar, actually creating mobility options for transportation within the city, you really need a dedicated revenue source because you can't issue public debt without a dedicated revenue source to back it up. The capital markets and the financial markets will not allow you to unless you have a revenue stream to be able to pay it off. And so we need a dedicated revenue source for transportation in this community. I thought we had it when Offer Transportation passed. It was the last 6 months of my term, and I was really excited knowing that finally we were going to make an impact on the transportation issue. Obviously, in a very, very political decision, the courts overturned it. That is tragic. That will set this community back decades. But for big projects like that, you have got to have a separate revenue source because you can't piecemeal it. And what we have been forced to do over decades in this city is piecemeal it. Thank goodness the CIT tax passed, that your grandfather was instrumental in getting passed in 1995. I can't even imagine what our financial situation would look absent that. But those are the kinds of dedicated revenue sources, whether they're property tax or sales tax, that have to be committed to by the voters, executed on by the city, and deliver results. Because you can't do it, literally out of every year's budget because you never have enough to be able to do the big, big stuff. And
by state law, the city cannot create its own tax, the city itself. That has to be through the county, correct?
Well, and I've been neck deep involved in this for years and thought I had a deal with Rick Scott probably 8 years ago when I was the mayor, Governor Scott, and we had worked on this for 2 years. Governor Scott had agreed to it as long as there was a referendum associated with it. We got all the way to the last couple days of the Florida legislature approving the budget. We had the language tucked in a transportation bill, and the Speaker of the House at the time killed it. I mean, we were that close to having the ability for cities of a certain size, 200,000 and above, to be able to do a referendum and let the voters decide on a sales tax within the city limits.
Why would the Speaker have killed that?
Because he didn't want to give the voters an opportunity to raise taxes on themselves of their own volition.
Does a part of the reason have to do with giving local government more power?
Part of it is a general philosophy against taxes and even giving the voters an opportunity to choose for themselves.
Wow.
And part of it is the desire by some in Tallahassee to really maintain a stranglehold on the ability of local cities and mayors to control their own destiny. And that's unfortunate.
It's unfortunate, but it's also, in my head, anti-American. I mean, why not let the people of a city decide what they need? This city for so long has complained about transportation. We passed a referendum, I think collected $500 million, which I don't even know where that's at. Is it sitting at the state? I think they're deciding how to distribute that.
Well, a portion of it will come back to the city. A significant portion will go to the lawyers that sued the city, which is ridiculous.
So who gets screwed? The citizens.
The citizens.
The people of the people.
And we suffer
Hillsborough
with
County.
bad transportation network.
Ugh.
You know, and the funny thing is, Garrett, the very party that proclaims that government closest to the people is the most effective is the very same party that puts a stranglehold on government and tries to meddle in local affairs when we do stuff that they don't like.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. And it is strange. And I wonder what the no tax period crowd, I wonder what their solution is for everything we're talking about.
They have none.
Right.
They say
I don't want my
should be
property
more
taxes
efficient.
raised $1. Yeah. I don't want this tax raised $1. Nothing goes towards anything. Well, then how the hell are you how are we going to have an adequate public safety system and transportation? I read a report that Tampa Fire needs a couple more fire stations. How the hell are you going to fund that? Fund that and the roads and the sidewalks. You know, taxes are for the common good. We don't want to get crazy. You know, we don't want to become a place like California where you've got city, state, local, all these different taxes. And I don't think that's what you're suggesting at all.
No. And you know, they will tell you, find more efficiencies in government, or, you know, I can tell you, having sat in that chair for 8 years, that city government has a history of being well run. We've had right mayors at the right time who have done the right thing. There is no fat in city government. We've looked, especially during the recession, I'm looking behind the seat cushions every day for spare change. City government is lean, it's mean, it's effective, it doesn't waste your money. But we should have the right as a community to decide for ourselves what our future looks like. And we know that these improvements are expensive.
Is a possibility at extending the streetcar, having the city completely take it over, funded and managed by the city of Tampa? Is that a solution?
Well, the larger question is, we have 1/3 of the funding from the federal government, 1/3 of the funding from the state DOT, thankfully. The city can't come up with its 1/3. Now, CRA dollars could have been used for that.
Right.
Instead, they were given to other folks. So we got to find that 1/3. Is it possible that the city could take ownership of it? It's always possible. I mean, that's not our core constituency, our core job. That's a job of Heartline. But we've got to find that 1/3 to even consider the extension of that trolley. And here's what will happen if we extend that trolley. All of the development that will occur around those transit nodes, whether it's light rail or whether it's a trolley, will throw off, again, thousands of millions of dollars of tax revenues that will stay in the CRA that could be used to fund other things. So it's a no-brainer.
Right. Well, the area we just described, where you're talking about all these different development opportunities on the north side of downtown, that area of downtown between the north side and Armature Works and Tampa Heights is ripe
Absolutely.
for opportunity. And it struggled for so long. And the Hall on Franklin, remember that?
Mm-hmm.
That was a great place. And I think that's actually in the process of a redevelopment itself. You've got the CRA spending a ton of money with the Tampa Downtown Partnership doing Franklin Street. I mean, there's a lot of good happening in that section. Why not add the trolley to the mix? It seems like a no-brainer investment.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is that third has to come from somewhere. And maybe because it was spent on other things, it can't be spent on the trolley. You got to pick and choose what you spend money on at the end of the day.
Yeah, but I pick projects that are going to replenish the CRA that allow me to go do other things too.
So in general, your philosophy about spending the city money is investing city money.
Invest it. Give
Right.
people a return on investment that's measurable. That creates more wealth and more opportunities and more development, more tax revenue. Because the folks ideally you want people living, working, and playing in that Tampa Heights area or Tampa Armature that don't have to take the car to work, that can get on the trolley every day and have a quick, convenient way to get downtown without having to get into a car, which means you need less parking garages. There's less traffic on the roads. I mean, that ideally is what you want when you create a live, work, play environment. And that's what Water Street has done largely.
A real city.
A real city, yeah.
A real city.
Where you don't have to get into your car to go to get the Publix.
And that helps everyone.
Everybody.
From the people who are disadvantaged, people that have no opportunity at all, to the people that are the most privileged in our society. It helps everyone having adequate transportation, because even if you never use it and you have adequate transportation like an extended trolley, well, guess what? That's a few less cars off the road for you.
Yeah.
Benefits everyone.
Yeah. Your commute's a little bit shorter.
Something I wanted to talk to you about is the stormwater issues we have in South Tampa, other parts of the city. We were ravaged by a historical rainstorm and hurricane last year. Obviously, the stormwater infrastructure conversation is such an expensive one. And I know the current administration has made a huge effort, and I think it's like 1.8. If you look up the PIPES program, it's literally the largest infrastructure investment in the city's history. It's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
And Mayor Castor kind of came out and said what I thought was funny. She's like, because people have a conversation about, well, shouldn't we spend the money on this or that? She's like, look, we got to do this. We just have to do this. This has to get done. $2.9 billion funding plan. So sewer, water infrastructure improvements. I mean, we've got sewer and drain systems in Tampa that are still ceramic from the 1920s and 30s that need
They're
replacement.
100-year-old pipes.
So I wanted to ask you what your administration focused on in this regard in terms of infrastructure, specifically stormwater, and then kind of where we're at and where you think we should go.
Yeah, great question, and certainly a very germane question given what we have been through. The predecessor to pipes is a project that I started in about 2016, where we, thanks to the city council, passed an assessment on everybody's property for stormwater improvements. That was the first time it had ever been undertaken. It was massive at the time. I think we spent $250+ million on stormwater improvements. And basically what we did, Garrett, is, and this was just to deal with your typical summer storm flooding, not a 100-year occurrence. There's no way that you can prepare for that, no way you can build to that level. So what we did, starting in about 2016, is we took the stormwater system in some of the most troubled areas and basically went in and cleaned out all the stormwater ditches, expanded the retention ponds, cleaned out the canals where you had trees growing in there. You had people put up illegal docks. You had silt everywhere, mainly along the fingers of West Shore. Cleaned out all of that, rotor-rootered, in essence, all of the stormwater pipes in those troubled neighborhoods, which was largely South Tampa, and there were some other parts of the community as well. I remember the staff showing me a picture of a 60-inch pipe, 5-foot tall pipe, that runs under Bayshore Boulevard coming out of historic Hyde Park that flows into the bay. That 60-inch pipe had literally 12 inches of clearance.
Just gunked up.
Totally gunked up.
And
shopping carts.
And how long would it take for all of that debris to accumulate?
Years.
So this was neglected, so to speak.
It was neglected partially because the city never had the revenues to be able to go in and do it in a comprehensive way, because there was no dedicated revenue source.
Right.
Once we passed the assessment, there's a dedicated annual revenue stream that we know that's predictable, that's going to grow every year, that allows us to budget and plan and to do projects like this. I mean, we went in and roto-rooted all of those pipes because the water can't flow if there's no clearance.
Right.
And so that really helped set the table for what Mayor Castor, to her credit, did with the pipes program, and built on what I had done and took it to a whole new level.
And all of that was done, well, I say all of it, right? What you're describing, right? Cleaning out the pipes, the ditches, all that sort of stuff. That was all done years ago, way before the 2024 storm season we just had. Imagine if none of that was done.
Oh,
How much worse. No. I mean, you would have had water for days and days and maybe a week.
It would have been, it was disastrous, but it would have been compounded probably fourfold.
Wow.
Had we not done that initial work.
And so what do we need to continue to do? And can we ever get to a place where there's not standing water after a heavy rain in South Tampa?
The topography doesn't lend itself to a cure. There are fixes we can do, because basically the city of Tampa and South Tampa specifically is a bowl. We are below sea level in some places. It's hard to push water out when you have high tides, and you have, in essence, a bowl, because water doesn't flow anywhere but downhill. You can't push it uphill. And so there are things that we can do, that Mayor Castor is doing, that can alleviate some of that. But in circumstances like we just went through this past fall, there's no permanent cure. There's no permanent fix. We have to be more strategic about how we build, where we build, how we harden the targets, if you will. Mm-hmm. There are things that you can do in the short term to make sure that you have adequate technology and pumps and generators in the event the power goes out, which it inevitably does. And you got to have backup generators at these pump stations so they don't go down, like what happened in Forest Hills.
Right.
So there are things that the city government can do, but I think we all need to recognize that there are parts of our community where it will be very, very difficult to accommodate the amount of rain that we saw. If we get a Cat 3, and this came close during Irma, a Cat 3 storm coming directly up Hillsborough Bay for a direct hit on Tampa, my old office, the mayor's office, will be 10 feet underwater. And there is nothing we can do to stop that. And so, all of Hyde Park, downtown Tampa, Harbor Island, Davis Island, where I lived, where many of my neighbors were flooded, it's going to be a problem. It is really going to be a problem. And so we've avoided it for 100 years. We can't avoid it forever, so we need to prepare for it, which is why folks during these occurrences need to pay attention to what the mayor is saying and what the authorities are saying. And so at least you can save your life. You may not be able to save your house.
Yeah, she came out and got a little flack because she said, look, if this storm is going to do what it's predicted to do and have 15 to 18 feet of surge in Tampa Bay, and you stay, and you're in a low-lying area, you're going to die.
Which is probably accurate.
And I thought, you have to say that.
Yeah.
How can you not say that? And thank God she was wrong. Mm-hmm. The storm went the other direction. I think we only had a few feet during Milton. Actually, I think we actually had water sucked out of the bay during Milton.
Yeah, during
Helene,
Milton,
we had the issues. Yeah. But boy, you looked at the projections at Milton, it was going to hit North Pinellas County 15 to 18 feet. You would have had water up to Ybor City. I mean, it would have been destructive. And to your point, there's nothing any government can do to stop that water from coming in the bay.
Yeah. And, I used to tell people, and the stormwater improvements are absolutely critical. But the city prepares for these storms all year round. We train, and we train hard. I mean, I used to tell our folks, you play on Sunday the way you practice during the week. And so we're going to practice during the week. And so what I quickly realized is you can prepare and practice and be ready for the initial stages of the storm and the aftermath of the storm in terms of the cleanup and what we need to do. In that window in between, you're literally in God's hands because there is nothing that you can do that's going to change the outcome. So, you can prepare to get ready and you can prepare for the cleanup and the aftermath, but in that window right there, and we've been lucky, knock on wood, whether it was Irma or whether it was any of these other storms that at the last minute it veered off and it was not a direct hit, but we saw the damage that a storm could do that wasn't even a direct hit, that we just happened to be on the wrong side of it, which was Helene.
Right. Yeah, you look at what's happened in California, they come out and say, oh, we ran out of water and we weren't prepared for this and that. And I think our local government and state government does a damn good job considering, hey, look, we live in an area that has these storms.
Mm-hmm.
We can't make the storms go away. The Florida DOT built that bridge to Sanibel in like 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, incredible effort. And growing up in Florida, I've kind of watched the state and the local governments get better and more efficient at these things. But at the end of the day, it's a reality we live with.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other question, can we handle it on our own? Do we need state and federal dollars to beef up some of these systems and pumps and all that stuff we're talking about? This is very expensive.
It is. And again, it gets back to the same thing we've been talking about. It gets back to revenue. The answer is yes, we need their help. And the federal government and state government have been very responsive to cities in these times. I think the key is, you keep the politics out of it. And let everybody do their job and do what they know is the right thing. And, the storm doesn't differentiate whether you're a Democrat or Republican, and neither should the elected officials at the federal and state level. But we've been lucky. Every governor that we've had, and I worked more closely with Governor Scott, they were superb. Yeah. Absolutely superb.
These guys are always on the ball.
Yeah.
I'm super thankful. As a citizen, you look at that and, if anything, that's what government is for.
That's what we should do.
Right.
Yeah, especially in times of need like this.
100%. I want to talk quickly about the environment. So we have a super sensitive environment here. I think we're the largest estuary on Earth. Mm-hmm. A long, long time ago before the Clean Water Act, I had Kathy Castor on the show and she talked about her family's efforts and getting that act passed. And that's why she was inspired to get into politics was our natural environment. Boy, if we lose our beautiful waterways and our beaches and the palm trees, people are not going to come here and it's going to screw things up for everyone. Mm-hmm. As Tampa grows and develops and all this exciting stuff is happening, how do we ensure we keep the water clean, the roads clean, beads out of the bay during Gasparilla, right, coming up this weekend? Where do you see the local government's place in not only ensuring the environment stays good to go, but making sure it's improved? I mean, we've came a long way for sure since the Clean Water Act, but we had the Piney Point issue. You've got some other issues happening around the sewer pumps discharging 60,000 gallons into the bay, much like many other municipalities around Tampa Bay. And before we went live, I was asking you, there's some state law where municipalities have to comply and fix that issue.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot there. But
no, there's a lot there, but it's important. The natural environment that surrounds us is one of the critical things that makes us such an attractive place. Whether it's, recreational fishing, hunting, boating, using the God-given environment around us to recreate and to enjoy. Every time I drive down Bayshore Boulevard, I'm reminded of what a special place I live in. Because I just look out and I'm like, man, I can't believe I'm lucky enough to live here. But it's important that local governments and the community protect it. And not just protect it, but enhance it. For much of my time as mayor, we saw a increase in the growth of the seagrass in the bay because the bay was getting cleaner and cleaner and cleaner, less discharges, less phosphate, less fertilizer runoffs. And that was a great sign because if the seagrass is growing there, that means the water is cleaner, which means the fish are breeding and the young fish can grow. One of the challenges, and you touched on it a second ago, that we face as a community, for which there are solutions if we're willing to look at them, is what we do with the discharge from our treatment plant. We discharge not 60,000 gallons a day, Garrett. We discharge 60 million gallons a day into the bay of very highly treated effluent from our treatment plant. It is discharged. It is cleaner than what we take in from the river, which is the main source of our drinking supply. But we discharge 60 million gallons a day into the bay of potentially drinkable water. The state has come in and said, cities around the state, you can't do that anymore. You got to find a way to use that water in a better way. Mm. We had plans to take that water, treat it again, so it's literally cleaner than the water that we take in from the river, and use it to pump it back into the aquifer upstream, let it filter down through the natural ecosystem, get cleansed again naturally, and let it flow into the river. Now, there were critics of that. There were, again, demagogues who coined it toilet to tap, which was ridiculous. This process is being done all over the world and being done successfully in places that don't have water and have to retreat it. And I'll give you a great example. Israel, surrounded by enemies who have sworn the destruction of Israel, not just the most recent situation. So Israel takes literally every drop of water that it uses and probably retreats it 3 or 4 times to use it again because it lives in a bad neighborhood. They don't get any help from, their upstream neighbors, so they have to reuse everything that they have. California does it. Cities and states all over the country use it. The science is there. It makes all the sense in the world. But there are some people who, for whatever their reasons are, most of which have nothing to do with science, block this. But at some point, we're going to have to do something with this.
Legally, I mean, the law says we have to do
something.
Yeah,
the law says we have to do it, and we'll put the burden back on the city and the cost back on the city. When there are solutions, we could have been doing this already now. We're not. And so we're still pumping that treated water into the bay.
What are the reasons against it? Does it cost, $1 billion? Is there evidence that it's not safe? I mean, what are the reasons why?
There's always a cost associated with it, but there's a cost associated with not doing anything and have the state come in and tell you have to do it. There is the perception issue, which I think is the larger issue. And that's why they successfully framed it as a toilet to tap.
Well, you got to give it to them. That's a great name for an anti-campaign.
Yeah, for an anti. They're wrong, but
Yeah.
But, it's easy to capture the imagination with false information and false portrayals. So, my sense is cities, not just Tampa, are going to have to go back, really start the education process and the community engagement process, and present the facts, present the alternatives, present the cost of doing nothing, and let the community come to a decision on its own. But I can tell you, whether it's expanding the reclaimed water so you can sprinkle your lawns with this,
right,
or eventually putting it back into the drinking water system, it's going to have to happen. I mean, we don't have a choice.
Well, I mean, irrigation is so expensive in the city. I mean, I've had water bills of $600-800. Some investment properties I own, larger properties. But boy, wouldn't it be nice if you could reduce that charge? But the problem is, can you reduce the charge? Because what is it going to cost to retrofit all this stuff? I mean, it's probably, I would imagine, a multi-$100-million project.
Oh, easily, yeah. And then, your grandfather started it, the reclaim system, back in the early 90s. And they did it on Davis Islands. They did it in South Tampa largely.
Yeah.
And you have to match the demand with the infrastructure. Because in South Tampa or Davis Island, that the people are willing and able to pay for the cost of the reclaim to keep their lawns green. Other parts of the city, perhaps less so. So you don't want to run a system and all the costs of the system to neighborhoods that aren't interested.
So this is a sort of looming problem that is going to need to get solved one way or the other.
Yeah.
By, call it 2033,
I don't know what the deadline
something
is,
like
but
that.
they're going to force our hands.
And if they force our hands, what's the contingency or what's the danger there that we're going to be forced to spend an incredible amount of money on maybe something that no one agrees with?
They may leave the how to the local jurisdictions. They're going to give most of the costs to the local jurisdictions. There may be some state grants involved, depending on who's the governor. But we got to prepare for it.
Right.
And we should prepare for it because that you have to look at that reclaimed water, that treated water as a city asset because it could be and should be. So they're either going to take it from you and use it for other jurisdictions, or they're going to force you into a plan that you may not like.
Sell it to Adventure Island. Maybe they would.
Well, we sell it to all kinds of industrial uses. Who, for example, Tico at the plant or some of these other other places that need water. It doesn't have to be drinkable water. So that's why it's an asset.
Right. And it's a lot too. I don't know where the hell I got 60,000. I think Tampa Bay Waterkeeper said 60,000 was dumped specifically in the Ybor channel and on one pump. But if you're saying 60 million is the total, maybe either they were wrong or they were just specifically talking about that one area. You remember, David, at all? No, because there's a big difference between 60,000 and 60 million. Interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll follow up on that in the next few years. Sounds like there's a little time, but as we've talked about, all of these issues take many years to work through. They do.
The planning process, the funding process, the construction process, and particularly with projects like this that are not as simple as building a road, because of the community education process, it's going to take a long time to get people to a solution that is palatable for not everybody, because you're not ever going to get everybody, but at least they are educated to the point where they understand why the city's having to do what it's doing.
And to your point, there's other municipalities around the country, different places around the world that have figured out a way to do this effectively.
It's done everywhere. The science is there. It's just the ick factor.
Right.
That people somehow come up, they're like,
well, it's kind of a valid thought at first.
I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not begrudging them that, but the reality is you can treat water to the extent that it's cleaner than what the water you pull out of the river and that you are currently drinking.
It's an amazing fact. I mean, it really is it's a technological marvel, actually.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, Bob, listen, thank you for joining me today. I did want to talk to you about, where you see the city heading. But first I want to talk specifically about the next few years, as the Castro administration kind of exits. And obviously, I'm sure they have priorities on the list. What are things specifically, right? You're the mayor for 2 terms. You're the mayor for 8 years. You hand the keys over to the next administration in hopes that they do the right thing. Of course, the new mayor has their own agenda, their own team, their own directive, right? But what are some things that are not being addressed or focused on? Not because they don't care, not because whatever, but things that you really want to be focused on here in Tampa?
I'm fortunate, Garrett, that I was able to, even though they had to pry my cold, dead fingers off that desk when I left, I loved every day being the mayor. I mean, I really did. It was a pure joy for me to have the opportunity to do that and to get to work every day. It may have turned my hair white, but for me, it was an absolute joy. And I hope that also was contagious. But I was lucky to be able to hand it off to my friend and my former police chief and somebody who I supported and endorsed and worked for to help get her elected in Jane Castor. She picked up the mantle. She's finished a lot of the stuff that I left her. She's launched on initiatives like Pipes that are her own, and that will be part of her legacy. And so I'm excited about what the future looks like. I think there are things that we need to do moving forward. One of them is to streamline the permitting process.
That's a big one.
It is. When I came in 2011, I basically had to blow the permitting process up and start all over again and rebuild it and got it to a point where it was a product or something that other cities were envious of because it worked so well. But it's something that always needs maintenance and attention from the mayor. And I think we've got to keep this momentum going. I mean, one of the things in the city building business is that you have to get up every day and recognize that you are in competition with other cities. And just like we snuck up on Charlotte, North Carolina, and we snuck up on Raleigh and Asheville and Austin, and none of them saw us coming, and we became what they had been 15 years prior, which was that destination city, that emerging Sunbelt city that was attracting talent from all over. We came up and knocked them off their perch, and we became that city. Now, if you think that there aren't 5 cities looking to knock us off our perch, you're kidding yourself. And so the mayor and the next mayor, and we've been lucky. We've had mayors that have been different political parties, different personalities, different histories with each other, but we all supported each other, and we all were proud of the work that our predecessors had done, and we worked to help our successors, and we finished the work, in my case, of Pam Iorio that was left undone. And, Pam did the same thing for your grandfather, and Jane will do the same thing depending on who gets elected for her successor. That's one of the things that's made Tampa so unique, is that we all work together for the greater good. But you got to get up every day and recognize you're in the fight. And you got to drive that message and drive that narrative and go tell the story of Tampa around the world. And so if you don't, that momentum will slip. And we won't be that target anymore. We will be a has-been. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important that we really maintain that hard-charging, get-her-done kind of environment that we have successfully mentored and fostered here, and it has become a reality. And so, yeah, you got to deal with the challenges of growth and the challenges of our successes. But at the same time, every day you get up and you put that eye black on and you get in the fight. And that's what mayors do.
That's what the citizens ask and expect you to do too. I think people in this city, people across any city in America, they want to enjoy their life. They want to make money and provide for their family, or be a mother that's loving to their children. And young people want to be ambitious and go to the best restaurants and enjoy themselves, right? The task of local government is to handle all that. Mm-hmm. And the people need to have the confidence in local government. In the news and over the last few years, it seems like there's fighting in local government. You definitely have it at the federal level. I hate to see it at any level of government. There's no excuse for it. It breeds inefficiency. It breeds public distrust. I don't think it's any one person's fault. Maybe it is, but there's just seems to be fighting, and it's unfortunate to see. I don't know what that's attributed to, and I don't even know why that's occurring, but it just seems like there's issues. And I think it's because we're now dealing with so many complex problems we've talked about today. People have varying opinions on how to get from A to B.
But you know something, Garrett? When I came in at 11, I was fortunate in the sense that at the same time that I came in, even though I'd been around for a while, you had a number of new people taking really important roles in this community, whether it was Joe Lopano at the airport.
Right.
Whether it was a new chamber president or a new EDC president or a new USF president. Everybody was focused on the mission. They knew what the goal was. They knew where we could go. They all did their job. There was no drama. Everybody was a good wingman and a good teammate for each other, and we executed on the plan. And when that happens, it truly is magical. That's when a city really finds its focus, and everybody goes and executes in their own specific area. Now, obviously, the mayor's got the biggest pulpit in town and can drive the narrative and drive the mission and drive the vision more so than others. But everybody rallied behind that. And yeah, the dark times of the recession forced us to do that. But there's no reason why we can't be doing it now. I mean, we don't need drama queens. We don't need naysayers. We don't need folks who are spewing a bunch of nonsense and inaccurate things. We need to stay focused on getting from here to here. That can be done. And so, yeah, you've seen a little bit of that fragmentation.
Right.
Some of it is the nastiness of the national discourse creeping down into local politics,
Right. Yes.
whether it's at the school board or where. But, you know, nobody should care at the local level who's a Democrat or who's a Republican.
Exactly.
Because that's certainly not the job of a mayor to care. I didn't. My job was to build a city, and we all ought to be focused on building the city and not, you know, the drama.
Mr. Bob Buckhorn, former mayor, you've taken us so far, and it sounds like you have some unfinished business. There's an election coming up in 2027. Have you thought about jumping in the race?
You know, I've heard that too. I get up every day still believing in the capacity of this city to be a great place. When I left office in 2019, I figured I was done. You know, I was able to go out at the top of my game. The city was a different place than when I got it. But what I came to realize is that all of us worked too hard to get us to that point. And none of us should stand by and allow that progress to be diminished, to be redirected. And I think a lot of people, particularly in the business community, are fearful of that. And so my answer is I'm not going to let that happen. I think we still have some more chapters to write in this book on Tampa. And if I can be a part of that and be helpful, it's a job I know. It's a job I've done. I'm not running for anything else after this. If I do this, it's only because I'm interested in what Tampa's next chapter is going to be, and I know how we can get there and finish this story.
I love that. I love that. That's fantastic. Well, good luck to you, sir. I think that's amazing, and I think everything you've talked about is, your philosophy of local government is special. I think there's a lot of noise, especially started on Monday, and that'll continue over the next few years in national politics. We can't let that infect us. We can't let that get in the way of progress. So the fact that you would highly consider jumping back in and make a commitment for the people of the city is an awesome thing.
You know, Garrett, when it comes to Tampa, my party label is T for Tampa. I'm only interested in people who are willing to help us. And I don't care whether they're Democrat, Republican, vegan. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that we work together to get us to the place where your kids and my kids are proud to call this home, that they come home here to raise their families, and that we can look back someday on our time here and say, because we were here, this city is in a better place than it was when we got it. That's it. That's why I do this. I don't have to do this, but we're going to make this place that place that we aspire to be.
I love it. Mayor, thank you for coming
on. All right,
on.
Garrett, thank you.
This was great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. All right, that's all. See you next time. Bye, everybody. Hey, guys, if you want to watch episodes just like this one, make sure to click right here to view the rest of our full episodes. And also make sure to subscribe by clicking right here. Thank you for watching.